New details have emerged that have me more concerned about Spencer Steer's reported shoulder injury than I initially mentioned that I was. I'll tell you why on today's Locked On Reds.
You are Locked On Reds, your daily Cincinnati Reds podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Reds podcast. Locked On Reds is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Stephen Offenbaker. That guy over there, he's Jeff Carr. We are lifelong Cincinnati Reds fans. We love baseball. We love the Cincinnati Reds, and we have been covering them in podcast form for a combined 14 years to bring all of that Reds information to you. On today's show, could the Reds look to add an old friend for the final spot in the bullpen? Or is there even a final spot that's up for grabs? We're going to get into that. Also, Andrew Abbott is continually getting disrespected. There is shade being thrown his way about him being part of this rotation, and we think it should come to a stop. But where we're going to begin today is with Spencer Steer, because his shoulder is not 100%. We're going to talk about all of that on today's podcast that's brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets back if your first $5 bet wins. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. And Jeff, where we need to get started is on this Spencer Steer shoulder business, because you look at these quotes from Spencer Steer, it's clear the shoulder is not right. He's not saying he doesn't think it's going to get right. He's working on getting it right. But I think this is our final lovely parting gift from David Bell.
Yeah, you and I have both heard some reports that make us feel as though there were some things that David Bell tried to push through when it came to health. He was like, let's make sure this guy's on the field. As long as he is mostly healthy enough and ready to go, then we were going to make sure that guy was ready to play. And it sounds like Spencer Steer was a part of this group. He had a quote that he had gave to Gordon Whitmire of the Cincinnati Enquirer. He said, quote, "I think just playing through it last year kind of put my shoulder in a not so great spot, and it just made it weak. Not all the muscles are necessarily firing the way they should. I'm just trying to get that all squared away and make sure that once I start throwing, I can throw and play 162 games." So Steve, like, honestly, this doesn't sound like it's resolved. This sounds like he's still healing. This sounds like it's an active recovery. And quite frankly, that sounds like the problem, or that sounds like the way that this problem was just multiplied for Spencer Steer. And I kind of hope we're not talking about Spencer Steer DH in 2025.
Well, in case you missed it last week, the Reds said that was the plan for at least the initial stages of spring training, that Spencer Steer is just going to hit. He's not going to play in the field while he continues to work on the shoulder. I suspect he'll be good to go by opening day. The language coming from Spencer Steer, what the Reds have said thus far, hopefully, much like everything else with the Reds, they recognize they need to get off to a better start with their transparency about players and player injuries, because that was definitely a problem last year. So yeah, I think we'll see him at least the first 2 weeks of spring training only DHing while he continues to work on the shoulder. Around the 2.5 week to 3 week mark, we'll start to see him in the field. That's my guess. That leads me to wonder if initially, when we do see him in the field, will they be willing to play him in the outfield? Longer throws, harder throws, more effort throws coming from the outfield. This, I think, leads into what we saw in a lot of the early speculation from both Mark Sheldon and Mr. Warm and Fuzzy Gordon Whitmire, that the Reds are going to have Spencer Steer at first base. That makes the most sense to me, because it's not as hard of throws, less throwing. The throw is the easy throw back to the pitcher most of the time after you've caught the ball. So I think that we were getting a little preview there. I think maybe Mark and Gordon both had this last week and were already basing their previews on it. But I'm fine with that. I'm fine with Spencer Steer at first base. I'm fine with what that creates as far as opportunity for others. And if he does have to play more DH at the beginning of the season for, the first, say, 3 to 4 weeks, right? First month, let's say by the end of April, I want him to be able to be Mr. All Over guy, because that's what he likes. That's what he told us. He said that right here on this very show.
He did, and he also told that to Gordon Whitmire in the Inquirer because he had a quote about his recovery, and he's like, it's not just about getting the arm right for this position or that position. The direct quote from Spencer Steer said this in the article. He said, quote, the way I'm trying to get my arm built up is to play multiple positions every day. I don't want to be limited to one spot because I don't think that's who I am. He said multiple positions every day as if like Terry Francona needs him to start at third and then move to first and then go to left and then move to second and all over the place. I love his mentality though. And I think that is kind of the key part here. The mentality part of this is that, okay, maybe you are healthy enough to bat, but where's his head at? Like he mentioned, and he has told multiple people this, that he is a guy that wants to play every single position that he can. He doesn't want to be limited here or there. He wants to play everywhere. And if they're telling him the only place he can play is DH, are we going to get the best at bats from a guy like that? And that sort of really gives me pause with all of this. The fact that he is still recovering from something that he really worked through last year. The fact that it's not to a point where he can definitively say exactly when it's going to be that he doesn't feel this pain anymore. And then the other part of this where it's like he is setting himself up for mental stress through all of this. And we know that when it comes to baseball, the more mental stress you got on you, the less that we're going to see the back of your baseball card look real good.
Well, yeah, and to that point, you look at his 2024, Jeff. He played in 158 games. So when he talks about playing all season, that's not that far-fetched of an idea. Him and Elly, I think both could be out there all 162 games if they were allowed to be without being forced to take a rest. But his numbers did suffer from the shoulder thing, Jeff. He slashed 225, 319, 402, where the year prior he slashed 271, 356, 464. So a definite decline in his numbers in two more games played. While I think the injury did contribute to that, let's also remember that was in actuality his sophomore season, and sophomore slump is a real thing. So I think those two things combined for that to produce that dip in numbers. But you're right. There is some concern that he's not going to be able to get off to a hot start if he's still feeling weakness in that shoulder and not able to approach his at-bats like he normally would.
And that's kind of the thing that I really want to lean into here, because I felt like he was an easy pick for a bounce back, an easy pick for a guy that was really going to just go off this season. This sort of mellows me out a little bit. Is that unfair to say? Like, do you?
No, because you're right.
Yeah.
Because there's nobody, me, you, most people that watch this team, there's nobody that believes that he's a 1.5 WAR guy. Nobody believes that. Nobody thinks he's going to stay there. But the shoulder does at least give you pause in saying, well, we think he should be a 3 WAR guy. We think he should be a 4 WAR guy. But now I'm willing to dial that back and be like, if he can, because WAR is cumulative, right? If he can get to 2.5 or 3 in the season this year now, knowing what we know now that we didn't know then, I'll be happy with that.
I would agree with that. And I think that that's kind of the expectation I also want to set. I feel like, sometimes we go a little bit far with our expectations, but I think that that's an easy expectation for a guy like Spencer Steer. He's super talented. It's just, that's where I'm so reticent to go crazy with the expectations here, is that these reports, these quotes, these things that he is saying, not things that we are speculating on, not things that other people have speculated on. It's direct quotes from him that he is still dealing with this. That has made me at least temper my expectations of Spencer Steer a little bit this year. I'm really hopeful that we are wrong about this. Remember, like 3 episodes ago when we said we were super worried about CES, and then the very next day, Terry Francona was like, I think he could play third base. He's in such a good shape. Hopefully, we're setting it up that tomorrow you're going to hear Spencer Steer's got the best shoulder we've ever seen. And so maybe that's what we're talking about here. But yeah, I'm a little bit reticent about that. And that's why I'm going to continue to monitor him as spring training goes along. But you know what, Steve? There's a guy who has gotten a lot of abject, completely unnecessary disrespect thrown his way, and I want it to stop, and we're going to make it stop. Coming up next. In sports, having a winning strategy is everything. It's how the best teams make it to the Super Bowl, the World Series, and the Olympics. The same goes for life. Having a strategy like life insurance from SelectQuote can protect your financial legacy and keep your family future secure. SelectQuote makes it easy to find the perfect life insurance policy. As one of America's leading insurance brokers with nearly 40 years of experience, they've helped over 2 million customers find $700 billion in coverage since 1985. What sets SelectQuote apart is their personal touch. Unlike other brokers that offer one-size-fits-all policies, their licensed agents tailor coverage to fit your unique needs. If you're in good health, you might even qualify for some same-day coverage of up to $5 million, no medical exam required. And it's more affordable than you think. You can get up to $1 million in coverage for as little as $20 a month. Get the right life insurance for you for less at selectquote.com/locked-on. Go to selectquote.com/locked-on today to get started. That's selectquote.com/locked-on. SelectQuote. They shop, you save. We are talking Cincinnati Reds baseball here today, every day, every week, every month, all year long, all throughout spring training, getting you set for opening day. Make sure you subscribe, become an everydayer, and make us your first listen every single day, because we love this Reds team, and we're going to be talking about them. Quite honestly, Steve, if there weren't cameras on us right now, you and I would be talking Reds baseball. That's just how we roll. All right. One of the things that we're talking about here today, and the fact that I have to even say this, I don't understand it at all. I saw that there was a tweet from MLB.com that had an early opening day roster prediction. And it was early. It was an opening day lineup and a starting rotation prediction for the Cincinnati Reds. And a key name was left off the starting rotation. Andrew Abbott, a guy that you and I discussed. Is he the second or third best pitcher on this team? They've got him completely out of the starting rotation. They have Rhett Lauder making the starting rotation over him. They have Nick Martinez. They have Brady Singer. They have Nick Lodolo, all above him. And I do not understand this. We are talking about a guy that, sure, he's not setting the world on fire via Cy Young, but he's shown me plenty to believe that a breakout is coming in 2025, Steve. Back me up on this.
Yeah, and just incidentally, that same tweet also had Spencer Steer at first base to piggyback on what we were talking about in the first segment. But yeah, yep. And what does Andrew Abbott have to do? He was number 2 in the team on games started with 25, number 2 on the team in innings pitched at 138. He had a strikeout per 9 of 7.4. His walks per 9 was a little high at 3.4, but you know who else had a walks per 9 of 3.4? Hunter Greene. So he's really not out of the realm of being at the front side of this rotation. And you've got a guy in Rhett Lauder who comes up in desperation mode, right? Makes 6 starts for the big league team. Now, I know you look at his 6 starts, a 1.17 ERA over those 6 starts. They were pretty short outings given he was on a very tight leash. He managed 30 innings, roughly 30.2 innings in those 6 starts. Strikeout per 9, 6.5, less than Andrew Abbott. Walks per 9, 4.1. So almost a walk more per 9 than Andrew Abbott. So why in the world would we tell Andrew Abbott, pack your bags, you're going to Louisville, stand by? Why in the world would that be part of the conversation right now? Rhett Lauder, while was great in his emergency desperation call-up, he did what the Reds needed him to do and showed us a quick snapshot of things to come. Rhett Lauder's going to be good, but he's not so good right now that you take a guy that started 25 games and threw 138 big league innings out of the rotation to make room for him. It's crazy.
And in those 138 innings, he had an ERA under 4. Like, we're not talking about a guy that just got by the skin of his teeth. He knows what he's doing. And I find this intriguing. And I think that the only argument you could throw at me right now to make me say, okay, you got me, is that Andrew Abbott saw a decline in strikeouts last year.
Yep.
He did. I'll allow that. He also took the walks down a little bit. He also really cut back on hard hit contact. The thing that he needs to do this year, and I don't think it's that much of a stretch based on his pitch mix, is he needs to up the ground ball rate. But everything else has come down. While strikeouts weren't necessarily like the sexiest thing, if you're going to come at me with strikeouts, I'm going to raise you what Rhett Lauder did last year. Because, yes, Rhett Lauder had a 1.17 ERA. Outside of that, where was it? Where was the performance that we say 6 starts of him is better than what we can get out of Andrew Abbott? I think Andrew Abbott has one of the higher ceilings on this team, and he's not exactly an ace-type guy, but he's an easy mid-level of the rotation type pitcher this season. I would expect that we're talking about like 25 starts, maybe 27 starts, something like that from him. But those 25 to 27 starts are going to be very consistent. They're going to be the type of numbers that keep the Reds in the game every single time. There were a lot of starts, and I know he made 6, so it's a stretch to say a lot, but most of those 6 starts that Rhett Lauder made, there were base runners that he walked on. Mm-hmm. And quite frankly, when you're walking guys, you're putting yourself in a lot of trouble. And I'm glad that he pitched around it. I really am. But I don't want to sit here and tell you that I know more about Rhett Lauder and I'm feeling more comfortable about Rhett Lauder than I am about Andrew Abbott. I think that Rhett Lauder's chances are more so with injury to one of the 5 above him or something like that. And that's how he can jump back into the major leagues.
He's 100% in my mind right now, the 6th guy, right? He's the 6th guy on the list. He's the first guy up if somebody's tweaked, tired, or needs a break, right? Rhett Lauder's your first phone call. We'll have the Rhett Lauder signal of cut out of long flowing hair, and they'll drive him up to the oval, and that'll be fine. But
the Rhett signal, yeah, I like that.
I can't wrap my head around this, Jeff. I don't understand. I don't understand where this is coming from. But I want to be clear because I can feel a disturbance in the comment section coming of we're going to be accused of bashing Rhett Lauder. And that's not what this is. This is more about respect for Andrew Abbott and what he has done during his time as a member of the big league rotation than it has really anything to do with Rhett Lauder. Because you can change out all the names. Rhett Lauder, Chase Burns, Chase Petty, all these other names, the conversation is the same. What in the world makes you think that right now, this second, you're going to get more production out of them than what Andrew Abbott has given you thus far? There's nobody that can show me that, because in 2 of those guys' cases, they haven't thrown a big league pitch. In 1 of those guys' case, they haven't thrown a professional pitch, and the other guy's made 6 starts. So you can't tell me that you have enough data set to remove a guy from the rotation that has pitched as well as Andrew Abbott has at the big league level.
And when you look back at last season, the 25 starts that he made, I love to kind of look back at game logs and things like that when it comes to pitchers and what they provided to the team. In 19 of his 25 starts, Andrew Abbott held the opponent to 3 runs or less. That's what we're asking for. Like, I understand that there's some other things that he can really, brush up on. He can really focus in on, and he can really get better at. But I'm not saying that he's better than Hunter Greene. I'm not here saying that he's the ace of the staff. I'm saying he's one of the best 5 starting pitchers on this roster. And I will stand by that until I see differently. And then I must see differently in regular season action. Spring training, no, we're not talking about that. But in regular season action, until he proves me otherwise, I think that Andrew Abbott's one of the best 5 pitchers on this entire organizational chart of players. And I think it's crazy that anybody would consider him as a write-off of the opening day roster.
Yeah, and I wonder if this MLB.com situation, that's not accredited to anybody. I don't know if they talk to Mark Sheldon. I don't know if they talk to guys that cover the team on a regular basis, or if some guy threw a graphic together that caught the tail end of the last 5 starts of last season. And we're like, oh, this Rhett Lauder guy is going to be in the rotation. Clearly, I don't know, but the fact that that's out on the official MLB feed, I find problematic because it just doesn't really reflect what this team's build is right now. Which is why it's always better to get your Reds news from places like right here, where we've got you covered every single day with local Reds knowledge versus national conjecture.
Exactly. But with that being said, there are some interesting thoughts out there. I've seen some folks asking about these guys. Could the Reds look add an old friend for their final bullpen spot. But I guess the question really is, Steve, is there even a final bullpen spot to get to? We'll answer that coming up next.
Spring training is getting started. Baseball is back, and there is no better place to get in on the action than with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. They've got tons of Reds-related futures right now, and my favorite one of those, Hunter Greene's strikeout total for 2025. They have him set at 160.5. That's right, 161 strikeouts from Hunter Greene, and you win. I'm going to take the over because Hunter Greene, he is going over. Looking for more than just baseball? Check out the NBA, because with FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tip-off and you want to bet on the fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets back if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets back. Make every moment more with FanDuel. If you can't watch us here on YouTube, take us on the road with you. We are available pretty much on every audio podcasting app there is out there. So take us in the car, take us to the gym, take us to the office, take Jeff for a walk down by the Ohio River. You don't want to miss an episode. So make sure you're subscribed. We want to talk baseball with you. All right, Jeff, there's been some clamoring out there for some reunited and it feels so good moments. Our old friend Amir Garrett. And by the way, Amir Garrett is the owner of my favorite brawl in baseball of all time. Charging the entire Pittsburgh Pirates dugout from the mound at Great American Ballpark will forever be one of my favorite memories of Amir Garrett. But he posted some video on social media out there throwing the ball, saying he's ready to go if a call comes, changed his mechanics. He wants to play. Our friend Chad Dotson commented on it. Amir even replied to that. And he seems to be wanting to find a spot to pitch. Likewise, there's some clamoring for a reunion with Lucas Sims, who up until the time of his trade was, the longest tenured Red on the team after the turnover that the Reds had and the loss of Joey Votto. So I can understand why there's some sentiment out there to bring these two guys back for a supposed final bullpen spot. Here's the thing. I don't believe there is a final bullpen spot to be had. I think when the Reds brought in Scott Barlow, that was the last dude. He took the last spot, because I also continue to believe that Graham Ashcraft is going to be in this bullpen. We just had this starting pitcher talk and them not believing that Andrew Abbott can make this rotation. Graham Ashcraft is not making this rotation. And given the choice between the bullpen and Louisville, Graham's going to pitch in the bullpen. He is not going to opt to go to Louisville and start versus be in the majors and pitch out of the pit. So for me, while this is fun to wouldn't it be great? There's not a spot, Jeff. Now, I would not be opposed to bringing either of those guys in for the spring to eat some innings and get some work in. And in Amir Garrett's case, I'd have to think he'd be willing to go to Louisville and wait for an opportunity. I don't know if Lucas would be so much, but Amir Garrett in AAA would be a really good insurance policy to have down there if you need a guy to come up and eat a few innings because of an injury or something.
Yeah, Amir has had a couple of tough years after leaving the Reds with the Royals and then really toiling along with the Giants. So he's probably more of a non-roster invite type guy. Lucas Sims, on the other hand, would be a guaranteed major league contract. That would not be, I would be shocked if he signs a non-roster invite type deal with anybody. Spot Track currently, I just saw, has his market value at 3.9, around $4 million per year. And they even had an estimate that he could possibly have a multi-year deal, which certainly the Reds aren't doing right now. But I just don't see that happening. The biggest question for me, Steve, there's two. There's two questions. The first one is a little bit of a what if, so I'll get to that in just a moment. But the second one is this. Is Tony Santillan a guaranteed guy? Are we just penciling him in? If he is healthy, he is in the bullpen opening day.
In my mind, he is. I mean, I guess you could argue against it, Jeff, but looking back
I'm not
at his
trying
season,
to. I'm just curious.
he pitched in 29 games last year for a total of 30 innings. In those 29 games, he had a strikeout per 9 of 13.8 and a walks per 9 of 2.7. He was completely effective for the Reds out of this bullpen. I don't know why you would not have this guy. Amir Garrett's not taking that spot and replacing that production. Alex Young is not taking that spot and replacing that production. Shaw is not taking that spot and replacing that production.
It would have to
even
be Lucas
Ian
Sims.
Jabot.
Like you would have to sign Lucas Sims.
It would have to be because even Ian Jabot, who is not a guarantee for this team, I don't know that he's definitely not striking out 13.8 per 9 innings. So I don't know at this point how you could argue against Tony Santillan not being in this bullpen.
Yeah, I take that. So the other one kind of comes with a what if, but like, what if Rhett Lauder's shoulder is a little bit more than they hope, and he's a little bit further removed from at least warming up for the season? And okay, he is our number 6.
Rhett Lauder was elbow, yeah.
Elbow. No, his was shoulder. His was shoulder. Yeah, throwing shoulder, sore throwing shoulder. Which I don't think I believe they confirmed there's like no structural damage there, but it's sore. But say that continues and you don't have your number 6 guy in the depth chart, do you then tell Graham, you're number 6, we need you to keep stretched out in Louisville?
So just in an effort so that we're on track, it's Rhett Lauder's elbow. MRI taken of Rhett Lauder's elbow showed no structural damage. This 2 hours from MLB.com. So elbow, not shoulder, no structural damage. So he's just going to be brought along slowly as a precaution.
Okay. So I like that. But I mean, my only concern is that is worse than they fear. And he is not available early on in the season. I feel like it would be more prudent to keep Graham Ashcraft stretched out as a starter in Louisville than it would be to put him in the bullpen. And if one of the 5 goes down, then you have to ask him to get back up to a starter. And then likely what happens is he makes a start, but he only goes like 4 innings. I don't feel like Terry Francona is going to do that. So that's my only concern. And I kind of throw those both out as devil's advocates because, number 1, I hope that Rhett Lauder is completely healthy and ready to go. And number 2, I believe that Tony Santillan is part of this opening day bullpen. So you have to squint really hard to see that last bullpen spot. But those are the options I think that kind of open it up if health is not a factor.
I think the best use of Graham Ashcraft would be to treat him as a starter in spring training and stretch him out to the 90, 100 pitches, which is what Terry Francona has said. He wants all the starters ready to throw 100 pitches on opening day. Yes. So do that with Graham Ashcraft. Nice. Do that with Graham Ashcraft. Regardless of what happens with Rhett Lauder, you put Graham Ashcraft in the bullpen, already stretched out at 100 pitch level, and you've got a few weeks to play with there. Graham Ashcraft's not going to go a week and then not be able to throw 75 pitches. It's going to take a little time for him to lose that endurance factor. I don't think one impacts the other is what I'm saying. I think the best use of Graham Ashcraft, if the other 5 starters are healthy heading into opening day and fingers crossed, toes crossed, whatever, that's the case. The best use of Graham Ashcraft is in the tail end of this bullpen in front of Alexis Diaz, in front of Taylor Rogers as your 7th inning, just scare the other team to death guy coming out of the bullpen.
Certainly would be amazing to see the entire starting 5 go through all of spring training healthy. But I like what Terry Francona has laid out there as far as his plan to get everybody ramped up. I remember one of his quotes, and we didn't really include that in an inspirational Tito quote, but I kind of liked it, was that he's like, it's day 1. There's no need for you to go out there and throw 100 miles an hour. We got a long season ahead. Like, let's get you warmed up. Let's get you leaning into it first before you go full bore. So I kind of feel like he's got a handle on this of how to keep his pitchers healthy through spring training, get them to opening day, and then hopefully get them all the way to the playoffs. But I agree. I don't think that there's really any need. I mean, if they want to go out and get Amir Garrett and throw him into the bullpen competition for whatever there really isn't much of a competition of, but to give him some innings in spring training, that's fine. I don't see them getting Lucas Sims because it would have to be on a guaranteed major league deal. And I just don't see them doing that, as much as I would love to see friend of the podcast, Lucas Sims, return. to the Reds because it just feels like the entire roster, let alone the bullpen, pretty much spoken for, as assuming that everybody continues to be healthy. But hey, that is where we will end today's podcast. Thanks so much for checking out today's Locked On Reds, making us your first listen. As always, if you're an everydayer, thank you very much. If you're not, make sure you subscribe here on YouTube and on your favorite podcasting app, because we're going to be with you all throughout spring training. Coming up on the next Locked On Reds podcast, we're going to begin previewing different positions and different players to the team. And we're going to start first with the man who is the most important to this season, the most important to this roster, and that is Elly Cruz. Terry Francona had plenty to say about his expectations for him. We'll talk about that on the next Locked On Reds podcast. Make sure you join us there. Why, Steve?
Because we are going to gather up all the news, all the information, all the rumors, and all the reports and bring them back here to keep you locked on Reds every single day. You hit your desk kind of hard there. You all right?
Hey, every so often.
Maybe out 4 to 6 weeks with elbow soreness?
Cracked fingernail, I think.